Here it is, one of the most talked about vehicles in recent memory, the 2018 Tesla Model 3. This is the car hundreds of thousands of people have put down a deposit for, in some cases with a year-long wait. What makes it so special that people are willing to do this? Well, it represents the first Tesla that a larger group of people can afford. The Model S and Model X start around $75,000 to $80,000 and can easily top $100,000 with just a few options. The Model 3, on the other hand, starts at $35,000. The announcement that this car would start at what is basically the average price of a new car in America for 2017 means that lots and lots of people are excited. The key word many people are missing, though, is starting at $35,000. For example, the one we're driving stickers for closer to $55,000. There aren't many options, but they are all expensive. The longer range battery, for example, will cost you $9,000, and that gives you a total range of 310 miles, which is 90 more miles than the standard battery. Any color except black will cost you $1,000. The upgraded interior, which has a long list of features, that's $5,000. Autopilot, which is a feature every potential Tesla owner is dying to get their hands on, it goes for another $5,000. So you can see just how quickly the price can increase and how confusing this can get. Like with any car, the starting price and the fully loaded price can be tens of thousands of dollars apart. So are these options necessary, and does this car drive like other Teslas? More importantly, does it live up to the hype? Well, I headed back out to Northern California to see for myself. Once you get behind the wheel of the Tesla Model 3, you start to realize just how different it is really from the Model S or any of the other Tesla models, the X as well. Not only because of the way the car feels to drive, but certainly because of this big screen that really feels like it's just been transitioned to a landscape mode instead of a portrait mode like you have in the other two. But the fact that there's no gauges, you have to look over to this screen to see everything for your navigation, for your phone, for your audio, for all those different things. Everything that you want to know about the car is on this screen. And it's a huge screen. It's easily the size of an iPad Pro, if not larger. It's pretty awesome. And the fact that the graphics are clear, the fact that you can get on here and use this touchscreen the same way that you would an iPad Pro, any other tablet or smartphone, it responds very well to your inputs. That makes it really nice. A lot of people have been talking about this car all over the internet, and certainly just anybody that you meet, if you bring up the topic of Tesla, people want to discuss this car. And the fact that it doesn't have gauges is one of the things that comes up on that topic. Well, I've been driving this car for a few hours now, and I can tell you that it actually feels quite natural to glance over here. Now, granted, the speedometer and all that information is right in your line of sight here on the upper left corner of the screen, so you can easily tell not only how fast you're going, but what the speed limit is, how many miles of range that you have left just by a quick glance. And I think if you have a car, or you spent time in a car that has a navigation system or has a screen, I mean, there's been cars with a screen here in the center for years now. So if you've had one of those and you've lived with it on a daily basis, I think it's going to feel even more natural for you to just glance over and see what your speed is. I do think it would be neat if you had heads-up display. That's one way that, you know, you could kind of split the difference a little bit. You still have the information here on the tablet, but this car does not have heads-up display. But if you do want to glance down inside of the steering wheel and expect to see some information, all you'll see is a nice piece of wood trim. Now, when you get out here on some of these twistier roads, because the batteries are in the floorboard, because everything is so low, the center of gravity is so low on these Tesla models, the handling is really exceptional. And I'm happy to report that it is absolutely exceptional on this Model 3. Now, one thing that will make it feel a little bit better is to put the steering in sport mode. I currently have it, I believe, in the comfort mode, and so it's got a little bit of play to it. And if you kind of go in here to the menu, you can switch it over to standard, which kind of splits the difference. Honestly, comfort mode's a little bit loose for my taste. It's fine if you're in a parking lot or you're trying to, you know, parallel park or do something that requires a lot more input. But if you want to drive out here on these kind of roads, and I mean, it's got plenty of power. The power comes on very strong, being that it's 100% electric. It does not feel like you're compromising by choosing a Model 3 versus the Model S. Granted, it doesn't have the ludicrous mode or some of those things, but this is still a quick car. It is still certainly as quick as other cars in this category for this size of a four-door sedan. So I have the steering in Sport now, and Standard is probably where you'll want to leave it, honestly, unless you're like me and you're somebody who likes to drive sports cars, likes to drive cars with a performance-oriented steering. In Sport mode, it is stiff. It does take a while to get used to it. I personally think it's great, but if you're somebody who wants to be in more of a luxurious mindset, you know, I always think of a Lexus, how you can just kind of drop your arm in those cars, and they just steer very effortlessly. If you put this in comfort mode, it will feel like that. The fact that there's a dramatic difference changing between comfort, standard, and sport mode in this steering, that's something I've been talking about a lot lately because, you know, it seems like everybody has a sport button now or a sport mode, but does it actually make a difference in the way that the car feels and the way that the car drives, and how dramatic is that difference? Well, in this case, going from comfort all the way over to sport makes a big difference, and it's one that I really like. Like any vehicle that runs 100% on electricity, the quietness really does take some getting used to. And the last episode I did was a car that was very loud, the Jeep Grand Cherokee Trackhawk. So going from that car into this car, oh my gosh, it's just, the quietness is kind of eerie at first. You're getting a little bit of road noise with the Model 3 that I didn't really hear as much with the S. But you have to remember, there is a massive price difference between these two cars. I drove a P100D on the show last summer, and that car retailed for right around $160,000, $165,000, depending on some of the options. That car had the red paint and the upgraded wheels and a lot of those things. This car is pretty much the top of the line. It has the premium upgraded interior. It has autopilot. This blue is a color that you have to pay extra for. This does not have the biggest wheels, but these are different wheels than the standard wheels that you can get on it. So you're looking at somewhere around the $55,000 to $60,000 mark for a fully loaded Model 3. Something else that I think there's been an awful lot of unfair comparisons with this car. I know a lot of people are comparing it to the S. I think that it's not fair to compare this to the S because this isn't supposed to be like the S. The S, if you want to think, I think the easiest way is to think about this in terms of BMW's lineup. Okay, this is more like a 3 Series, whereas the S kind of splits the size and the price between a 5 and a 7 Series. If you got a fully loaded 7 Series, it would be on par with a P100D. The same with the X, you know, that's really more of a higher-end SUV, and there is an SUV coming that's going to be in this size range called the Model Y, at least that's what we hear. You just never know with these things. Tesla's pretty tight-lipped about some of the stuff that's coming soon. But, I mean, if I'm really honest, the car drives really well. I've really enjoyed driving it. I think you really get used to the electric power very quickly. It feels great. The handling is great. It's a sporty car. It has a nice interior. The screen takes little to no time to get used to because you can easily glance over and see all kinds of information. I love the fact that they use the Google Maps on here. I think that's something that other car manufacturers are starting to do more and more of. But this, having it on such a huge screen, you can really pinch to zoom and do all the stuff that you want to do and get info about when you're going to need to charge, or how much juice is going to be left when you get there, how long it's going to take you to get there, what your arrival time is. All that information is here, but it's also easy to read because as many systems as there are on the market now, they're not all created equal. So when you get in something after driving this that's in a similar price range, let's say a car that costs between $40,000 and $60,000, you're immediately going to think, well, this screen seems kind of dinky. Even if it's an upgraded screen that's new for 2017 or 2018, this car definitely beats it in that category. Would it be nice to have some physical buttons here and there? Maybe so, but I think you'd be surprised how fast that you get used to everything being touchscreen. You know, you have these buttons on the steering wheel, and there's only 2 of them, and they're really the only hard buttons, if you will, in here besides the window controls. And what's interesting about these knobs is they will control the audio when you're just kind of in a normal screen, but as you go in here, they can be used to adjust the power steering column here. If you want to tilt or telescope, you can use them to adjust that. You can use them to adjust the outside mirrors. There's a whole bunch of stuff that they can do, and I think that there's a bit of a learning curve there because they're not marked, and they can move and click and do a whole bunch of different things. But when you get into the screen for, let's say, adjusting the mirrors or adjusting where you want to put the steering wheel, it tells you on the screen exactly which button to do and what it does. So they've made that very, very easy. When you get into these menus and things and you think, well, how am I going to adjust these mirrors? There's no button to adjust the mirrors. Well, you can use the buttons on the steering wheel. It tells you how to do it exactly just by clicking on mirrors in one of the sub-menus. I've really become a big fan of this black interior, but also this nice wood panel across the dash, and the way that they've done these vents, the way that they've done those so that the air is coming out and you can sort of feel it. You can make ridiculous amounts of adjustment in this menu as far as where the air is coming out of, if it's blowing on your feet, if you want it on your face. All those things you can change. You can split the air so that it's still blowing strong, but it's never actually going to hit you in the face because this vent goes the entire width of the front of the car. And so I think that's kind of a neat idea and something that nobody else is really doing. You know, sometimes I feel like, especially in the summertime, if it's really hot outside, that the cold air is blowing so much in your face, it's not necessarily cooling you off, and it's just kind of annoying, and it's loud and all that kind of stuff. Whereas this kind of just does what I think an automatic climate control system should do, which is I'm going to set the temperature on what I want it to be on. You switch between cool and heat, and I don't really want to know what you're doing. I just want to be comfortable. I don't want to hear a loud fan. I just want the air to come out hot or cold depending on what I've set it on for my comfort, and I don't really want to be bothered by it or interrupted by it. I don't want a lot of extra noises. The best automatic climate controls do that. They work in the background where you don't really know what they're doing. That's how I think an automatic climate control system should work. That's how this one works. This vent across the entire front, the fact that there's no little stupid things you have to, you know, mess around that are plastic and can break and all that kind of stuff. Now, one thing I will say about the ride in this car, the ride is a little more firm than certainly what you get in the Model S, because the Model S has the air suspension. I wouldn't say this is a rough ride. It really depends on what kind of a road that you're on. Some of the roads that we've been on today I thought were a little rough, and so it's a little more noticeable than what it would be maybe if you're on the highway or something like that. But it's not as smooth as the S. I don't think it's supposed to be. I think it's supposed to err a little bit more on the side of sportiness, and it does in that sense. And I think that definitely aids with the handling, along with the fact that this car has a shorter wheelbase. It's a smaller car, center of gravity is low, it's electric, all those things. That really helps with the handling, but I think if you're getting in this car and expecting it to have the same level of ride quality as the S, it does not. And I think that's okay. Now, when it comes to options, they are a little bit pricey, and you can get this premium upgrades interior that I've been talking about, where you get the premium sound system and a lot of this stuff. But the number one thing I think that's great about that upgrade is this glass roof. So it's really these two humongous glass panels. The rear window actually makes its way all the way up to in front of where the rear passengers' noses will be when they're sitting back there. And I think because of that, the rear seats do not feel as cramped as they could. I love having an all-glass roof like that. It's got a decent amount of tinting on it, so it doesn't, the sunlight back there never really feels harsh. So I don't think it needs a sunshade or anything like that because of the level of tinting that it has. The back seats are not the most comfortable, I will say that. These front seats, very comfortable, A+. The back seats, not as soft. They don't really surround you as much as these front seats do, so you can kind of be sliding around in the corners and things if you're sitting back there. It doesn't have as much give to it as you kind of sit back into it. It seems kind of straight up and down. It almost feels like it should just recline a little bit more than it does. And the headroom would be fairly compromised, I think, if you did not get that glass roof. A couple of other things I wanted to highlight in this video include these new vanity mirror covers, which look like the Apple Smart Cover from the iPad. They're starting to appear on the Model S as well. It's also worth mentioning the lack of free supercharging with the Model 3. At first it sounds like a bummer because you've heard so much about Model S and X owners having this perk. Well, the good news is, most places, the cost is roughly 12 to 30 cents per kilowatt hour. In the state of California, the current cost is 26 cents per kilowatt hour, which means you could get fully charged up for $20 or less. I also wanted you to see how much cargo space you gain by simply folding the seats down, even though the Model 3 is not that big of a car. Because Tesla's all about tech, they've come up with a great way to plug in and charge up your smartphone on the go. This area down below the screen has both Apple and Android plugins already installed, so you won't have to bring along a cable. Okay, so we're out this morning on the freeway and we're going to see how autopilot works. Now, one of the ways that you can know that this is ready to go is you'll see this little steering wheel icon up here on your screen. Very similar to the S and the X model. It tells you what the speed limit is, and you can see where you've set your speed, and you can see these lines and you'll see kind of how the car's doing. And so then this is kind of different versus some of the S's, because what you do is you actually hit the same stalk that you would to put the car in reverse or in drive, and you just hit it down twice. And you got to keep your hand on the wheel, just kind of like this, and it allows you to use the touch screen here to change what you want your max speed to be. Right now we have it on the speed limit, but if I go up a couple miles an hour, it will accommodate that. You're supposed to keep your hand on the wheel, but as you can see, you can take your hand off for a second. It'll start to yell at you a little bit and tell you to get with it and put your hand on the wheel, but it's pretty simple just to rest your hand right here. And it's very relaxing. It can accommodate as the traffic will start to pick up. Up here you'll see it start to brake for us. It'll bring the speed down. When the lane clears, it'll pick it back up. It's doing it all. All you have to do is just kind of sit here and keep your hand on the wheel. Sometimes when the line disappears, it does kind of get a little interesting. If the line disappears to the point where the car can't be an autopilot, it will cancel itself out. So like right here, we don't have an outside line, so it's kind of, you can see the wheel kind of moves a little bit and it doesn't take you out of the lane. It's not anything to be nervous about, but it's not something that you would do as a human driver. So that takes a little bit of getting used to. If you've driven an S or an X with autopilot, it's very similar to that. The only thing that's really different is the stalk. I think at first, if someone doesn't explain to you about how the autopilot functions, you could be nervous that you'd be putting the car into neutral or something like that as you're going down the highway, but that's not the case. You double tap it twice, you're already in drive, so there's no chance for it to go into neutral. If you tap it once, it'll just be like a normal cruise control, but tap it twice and it goes into autopilot, and you'll see the icon of the steering wheel turn blue there. So right now, we've got somebody in front of us, so I've got the speed limit 65, I've got the max on 67, you can see my hands are off the wheel. 57 is what we're doing because we have somebody here that's in front of us. And you'll not only see them out the front windshield, but you'll also start to see them as they move into range here on the screen as well. So you can kind of get an idea of what autopilot is doing or what it's thinking while we're doing this. And we're starting to turn, and I'm just going to leave my hand off the wheel for a little bit here and see how we do.
The Tesla Model 3 is a great car. It's quick, it handles well, and this version goes 310 miles on a single charge, which is a big deal, even starting at $44,000. There isn't another electric car on the market that can come close to these numbers at this price. If you're seriously considering a Model 3, forget the $35,000 base price and start at $44,000 with the long-range battery. You won't be sorry. Also, plan to wait 12 to 18 months to get yours at this point. If you can't wait that long, I have spotted a few for sale as used models around the internet. Most of these are private sellers, and you can't expect to pay a premium because there just aren't many of these out there yet. We took this one to a supercharger and got asked several questions from a Model S owner who hadn't seen one up close yet, even though she said she has a reservation for a Model 3 for a family member. It gets plenty of attention wherever it goes, if I'm honest. There are a few items here and there that seem a little clunky at times, like the valet keycard, which didn't work for us on several occasions. Was I not putting it in the right spot, or was it just not in the mood to go for a drive? Who really knows? Realistically, most owners will just use the app, but an optional key fob would be nice. No gauges really only bothered me at night because I'm so used to the glow coming from behind the steering wheel. Even then, it wasn't a big deal after a few minutes of driving. The only other complaints I have are small. The back seat could be more comfortable for a car in this price range. Having to use the screen to open the glove box can be annoying at times. But overall, these complaints are pretty minor. They've built a car that's fun to drive, has a good amount of electric range, and plenty of cargo space, especially considering that frunk. It'll be interesting to see where the car goes from here because, like Teslas before it, they're constantly sending updates over the air to make the car better. If you get a chance to drive one, I highly recommend it. It's a different experience even if you've driven other Tesla models. Thanks so much for watching this edition of Phil's Morning Drive, and we'll see you next time.